It's an honor to be back at Ethereal and to be with such a wonderful group of panelists hosting the DAOs panel. I wanted to maybe start by doing a round of intro, going through and saying a little bit about ourselves and sharing a little bit about our DAO projects. I can go first quickly. I guess the most relevant titles for this context are I was one of the co-creators along with Jesse and Sarah Swathi of Ethereal. Very exciting and heartwarming to see it going virtual and reaching so many people during this weird time. And I'm also the secretary of a group called MarketingDAO, which started as an experiment to see whether we can use the DAO structure to incentivize and align funding and execution for marketing projects that benefit Ethereum as a whole. It's a decentralized platform, obviously, and so the thought is that perhaps it can be best supported by a decentralized marketing apparatus. We're not sitting in any kind of order, but Peter, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah. So, hi, I'm from the MetaCartel, and I guess we're working on many different DAOs. I guess originally we were a technical working group, and now we're more shifting towards becoming this like homebrew computer club of like DAO creators, right, and DAO summoners. More recently, I guess, we've launched, Venture DAO, investment DAO that's mostly focused on being founder-driven and, founder-orientated. We've got about 30 different angel investors and founders in it, right? And we have a bunch of funding in it, and, we've been operational since a month and a half, 2 months ago, right? And we're about to make our first deployments. Otherwise, and within the MetaCartel ecosystem, we have other DAOs coming along, right? Such as, MetaFactory, the decentralized fashion brand, Factory DAO, right? Metagame, decentralized religion, if you will, and many other cool things such as like MetaClan, esports gaming DAO. MetaCartel is kind of at the center of that.
Great, thank you. Santiago, do you want to go next?
Hi, yes. I'm Santiago Siri from Democracy Earth Foundation. We are an organization that has been trying to understand what democracy is in the information age. Throughout the last 5 years, we have done a lot of experimentation in this. And in particular, recently we have been very much in collaboration with different DAOs happening in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm also a member of Moloch DAO, which is, I think, one of the most interesting experiments in the space. And what we're focused on working on today are some tools that help onboard new users to this new type of entities, these new type of organizations, and hopefully also bring some of our lessons we have learned in terms of what's good governance, what helps to keep these entities as they face high risk decisions require high legitimacy. So we have learned a lot throughout our pilots in the last 5 years what can lead to good governance, and hopefully contribute some ideas on that as well for as DAOs pick up and take over the world.
It's great to be here with the rest of you guys. I'm the co-founder and lead of Peeps DAO, which is really a DAO creation platform for organizations like nonprofits, political organizations, or just like grassroots causes to be able to easily create their own DAO to pool cryptocurrencies like DAI or USDC, or even their own kind of custom ERC20 tokens, and then deploy it to the activist initiatives projects that will move forward their mission. Aaron is also a co-founder of the project. So it's great to have him on, or hopefully he'll be back. And we're actually also a fork and kind of customization of the Moloch V2 smart contracts. So, really appreciate the work that MetaCartel and MolokDAO did in really kind of like reinvigorating the DAO space and providing the foundations for us to build off of.
Great, thank you. And I think for one of my questions, we're going to touch on Moloch v2 and everything that means. But first, maybe we can talk about why did each of you choose the DAO structure for your project? What did it enable you to do that you wouldn't have been able to do with another structure? Anybody's game.
Well, I chose Moloch DAO. So MetaCartel DAO was the first DAO that was created, right? Chose Moloch structure because I was rejected from joining Moloch DAO. Sorry?
Well, not the first DAO that was created.
No, it was the first DAO within the MetaCartel community that was created. And, picked that because it was rejected from joining Moloch DAO. So that's a reason, I guess. But otherwise, I think like Moloch DAO just proved that, this dumb, simple, stupid, solution actually works. I think like DAOs prior to 2019, like early then, so Moloch was like, summoned, during ETH Denver, right? Like during mid-February 2019. And prior to that, DAOs were pretty abstract. People were still talking about DAOs in a highly theoretical level. Don't think, there were too many DAOs back then that really like actually created immediate impact. And I think, the Moloch DAO originally kind of grounded the whole entire discussion around DAOs to be into something very simple. And, like it showed that DAOs didn't need to be complex to work. And it coordinated about 20-ish people with to coordinate about like $200,000 worth of funding. And, it did that, it did its job and started solving problems straight away. Yeah, and it did so without needing to go through the motions of setting up a legal entity and, the frills that comes with that, right? It just started doing its job. So I think like that was a really interesting moment for me personally.
Cool. That makes sense. Definitely getting to skip straight to impact is one great reason to start a DAO. What about you, either Bill or Santiago? Reasons that you chose the DAO structure for your project or things that it enables you to do that no other structure would?
Yeah, I
I'll
can
chime in
go
on
quickly.
that one. You can go, Bill.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Santiago. Since Moloch DAO's the original, you should go first.
No, I mean, I can tell a little bit of the story of how I got into Moloch, which is interesting. One of the members, Mariano Conti from MakerDAO, actually created this bribing contract that it was, you could use his shares on the DAO as long as you paid him half an ETH. And I was the first one I proposed my candidacy to Moloch by using that smart contract Mariano built, where he, allowed me to bribe him on chain, and that's the interesting thing about what we're seeing with Ethereum beyond just finance. It's allowing for new governance experiments, how these new governance techniques interplay with money and how money can, find circuitry in order to trigger decisions in new ways. And that's what I find exciting about the space as a whole. I think, I think that it's driving me to keep on researching into this space is also the fact that DAOs don't live in any single jurisdiction. We are able to create, if I'm from Argentina and if I have to think about creating a nonprofit or think about creating a corporation or any kind of company in a country like mine, that will take you just 3 months to 6 months. A lot of red tape, a lot of lawyers, and the ability that blockchain technology has to abstract away the jurisdiction and be able to create entities that can be connected to a global economy in a permissionless way and directly interact with different kinds of assets has tremendous potential. And that's what's keeping me engaged with the space as a whole. Yeah,
so for us, basically what Santi said, we're focused a lot on the nonprofits, the political organizations, the grassroots organizations, which by their very nature tend to be more decentralized in the way they're governed. A lot of these organizations in Web 1.0 and 2.0 are volunteer-led, tend to have committees of people who really drive the mission forward. And so, back in early 2019, when we started working on this project, we building around the system, and then Moloch launched, and we were like, okay, let's figure out how to build off of that. And it really was when the V2 contracts launched that we were able to fully leverage the Moloch DAO kind of structure in a way that makes sense for these kind of nonprofit or grassroots organizations, and do exactly what Santi said. All of a sudden, you go from weeks or months to set up your legal entity and your bank accounts and all of that, to a place where you can create a Peeps DAO in a matter of 2 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on how fast mainnet's running, and get to raising money for your cause and giving it out to the activists that you need to go do stuff for you. And we've just built our system so that if you have an existing legal entity, we can work with that and we can provide you all the compliance info you need. And if you want to create a legal entity, you can go do that behind creating the Peeps DAO. But there's no more barrier to you starting an organization and raising money in a trustless, decentralized way. And I think that's like a really exciting innovation that we shouldn't overlook for the space.
Agreed. And now we've had the Moloch V2 contracts come up a couple of times. So maybe we can discuss what do you think the significance is of Moloch V2? What does it enable? How are you using it?
Yeah, so I can take that one really quickly for us. The thing we didn't like about Moloch V1 was that you had to quit to get the money out. And for the audience that we're trying to serve, where they need to give out grants, Moloch V2 allows us to do that easier without having to kind of give members shares and deal with that token economics and then require people to quit. We did build an admin layer on top of the Moloch V2 contracts to allow for a little bit greater centralization for organizations that have regulatory requirements, like political committees. And so that was the other advantage of the Moloch contracts, is they're open source, they're well done and pretty modular. So it was easy to take the kind of core V2 contracts and then adopt them to fit exactly what we needed.
How about you guys? MetaCartel, Moloch. Can you speak to maybe a little bit about the significance and the changes that have come with V2?
Right. I mean, so if you look at the Moloch contracts, right, they're very simple. They take a very they take a very lean approach to the architecture of and how it's designed, right? Like I said before, prior to Moloch DAO's smart contracts V1 that was created specifically for Moloch DAO itself, right? You have DAO Stack and you have Aragon, and they have very complex but yet modular DAO frameworks, essentially. You can plug and play, and that's kind of why they're nice, right? But for the specifics of, like, say, Moloch DAO launch 1.0, right? So basically most of the code was finalized right up until its launch. I think like with Moloch DAO's launch, right? Like the audit finished like a couple of days ago before it was launched, right? And it was like, I guess you could say, it was in the month and a bit, I guess, leading up to it. it was just put together, right? And in a sprint. And during that sprint, they looked at what Moloch DAO 1.0 needed, and they threw away everything that they didn't need and just kept the bare minimum, right? So the nice thing about this is that you get very simple code. You get very identifiable, readable code. It's like several hundred lines of code, right? And the nice things about that is that not only is it like secure. Like first thing is that it's secure. At least complex code is typically hard to audit, and also as it's ambiguous in that fashion, right? Secondly, the interesting thing is that I've been talking to different communities around the world about DAOs, and I've always shown that, like, the engineering, whoever's head of the engineering, right, the Moloch DAO code, as opposed to every other smart contract, or DAO smart contract framework, simply because oftentimes there's language barriers. And the interesting thing is that, simple code actually translates very well, across language barriers. And you have this social, scalability of this simple framework and simple idea of like, oh, I put money in, I rage quit out, I leave, we vote. Cool. You can read the code and, within very quickly, and you can roughly understand what it does, right? And I guess with Moloch v2, the smart contracts, right, it takes a very similar approach, right? So Moloch v2 smart contracts, it was built for the launch of both, a venture DAO, right, MetaCartel Ventures, as well as a DAO. We kind of collaborated together on the scope of the smart contracts, right? And essentially the goals with Moloch v2 smart contracts was how do we create these for-profit investment DAOs, right? That can operate in a regulatorily compliant manner, right? And that was the basis and fundamental, I guess, design goal of Moloch v2. And that's why, features such as you can kick people from the DAO now. In V1, you couldn't kick people. In V2, you can manage multiple tokens, handle, ETH, you can handle MetaCoin, you can handle other things, right? You can, in V1, you could only handle one token, right? And I guess there's other features such as you can directly pay people, like Bill said. It's nice like that, right? And I guess, there's some other, little nuances here and there, but overall, I think it's definitely a lot more flexible as a tool and a platform, I think, just even generally, aside from being retrofitted for both, venture DAO and the DAO originally, right? So yeah, I think I definitely think it's you can kind of, I think it can be used for many different things now, to put it simply.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to just introduce our latest guest, Aaron Wright, in a different form. Now, a very different and also wonderful person on the Open Law team. Priyanka, do you want to introduce yourself and say just a quick couple of words about the Open Law project?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry to jump in at the last minute here, but I'm Priyanka and I lead operations for the Open Law team, which put together the DAO, which launched last Tuesday, which is a for-profit DAO aiming to invest in projects in the Ethereum ecosystem.
I'm glad you're here because we just brought up the DAO in the context of your collaboration on Moloch v2. But moving from the more technical topic to kind of the finance world, I've certainly heard the idea that DAOs could be the next ICOs, and that DAOs could facilitate easier access to tokens for groups of people in a way that would be maybe not reminiscent of the activity that was dominant in 2017, 2018, but resonant. What do you think of that idea? Is that where you see DAOs going?
Yeah, definitely. And I actually think it was you who said that over ETH Denver. I really like that quote. So I would say that the way that we think about Ethereum and why it is so powerful is I think Ethereum in a way brings together communities, and the next phase of that is pooling together assets to then deploy to other projects or other grants or for profit. I think that's really where the value was with the ICO boom. People felt like they could rally around a specific protocol, support it through capital financing, through some sort of token. And I think the DAO is very similar in that way. Obviously, the security tokens and the security laws around tokens, that's going to be a long slog. We're going to have to wait for the courts to really figure that out. But the beauty of DAOs is that we can really start utilizing a massive benefit of Ethereum and blockchain and make that all legal and above board and not really have too many questions, like outstanding legal questions around that. So yeah, I would say that DAOs is a nice complement and a nice direction to take this, and in a way that we have some more legal clarity as well.
Well, it's, there is always like the second coming of the money grab 2.0 phase, that we'll likely expect with DAOs. Like tokens in essence, were always here about tokens were all about like what DAOs were kind of really, tokens kind of enable decentralized and autonomous communities. Like tokens were kind of about like creating projects that were community run, community governed, community owned, community managed, right? And we just end up with this like entire landscape of abominations, to be honest, right? Because greed, because of many other things, and I think like we see the same thing hit this wave of DAOs, absolutely. But I think that you can't you'll reap what you sow, and you really can't get away from like taking these shortcuts, because we've seen that with these tokens, right? You don't build a community by selling large chunks of your community out to the largest bidder. You don't, communities are built with trust, right? Strangely enough, it's not about the self-sovereign individual. It's about the self-sovereign, sustainable community and the group. We're strong together, and we're greater. We're better than just the individual, right? And I think that you can't get away from the reality of this fundamental essence of community. There's no shortcuts to take. There's no shortcuts to take to building trust. You can't buy trust. And you can't hide the fact that you don't have a community or know that you don't have trust. And I think that DAOs are kind of like the first step to thinking about like how can we create the projects that we want to create in Web3. Back down to a fundamental level, where a lot of these DAOs are starting off permissioned. They're essentially tokens that are permissioned, and they're growing, and these communities are growing slowly, being created properly, right? As opposed to starting decentralized from day one. It's very hard to coordinate a community when it's fully decentralized from day one. It's hard to build trust that way. It's hard to build shared context. So I think like DAOs are like probably, where we see a lot of projects start, whether they're tokenized, decentralized, or whatever, right? And, we might see a progression from DAO to being something more decentralized over time, right? But the thing is, then again, today's DAOs, I see a lot of people talking about DAOs and DeFi, and then, they're really just slapping down on top of like a centralized project. It's like, you don't need like a team, you don't need a community to build better tech. It's like, you can build a company to build better tech, right? Why are you building a DAO? Why do you need one? So it's really like, I think there's some like cognitive dissonance there, and some laziness, I think. And yeah, so money grabbing, definitely here to come.
Yeah, my hope is
Go ahead.
That kind of Peter's vision holds true, and that DAOs are really for communities and bringing people with a shared interest or purpose together to accomplish their goals. And you can't do that quickly. Most of the Peeps DAOs on our platform are starting small and growing slowly as the communities and the trust is built. I personally hope that DAO doesn't become such a buzzword that it just becomes the next ICO money grab. And to the extent that people are using DAOs to raise and distribute money like the Lao is, the thing that gives me hope is people like Pri and Open Law and the Lao are doing it right this time, rather than just kind of like a Wild West of issue a bunch of tokens, get $1 million, and then disappear to like build your protocol.
Yeah. On that note, actually, what I think is kind of interesting is if you think about ICOs, it's like a community of people who are supporting a group of people producing a protocol. Whereas a DAO community is really reliant on each other. So in a way, compared to the ICO type of fundraising tool, DAOs are actually even more decentralized because you're really reliant on the success as a whole rather than a group of people putting together some sort of software, which is actually
there's a big difference between. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, there's a big difference between communities and audiences. Like, you can build an audience and you can run crowdfunding for an audience, right? But DAOs, communities are vastly different.
Right.
They're similar. They can be meshed in with each other, right? But communities are really like groups of people that engage amongst one another. Those are kind of communities, right? That like engage amongst one another and leverage each other, right? And I think like ICOs leverage like the audience very well, right? And whereas to create a decentralized autonomous organization where I guess as Bill puts it, or I heard it somewhere else, where you introduce, like, you look at it through the lens of like hit by bus factor, right? I think that you really have to like create a community of contributors that care and are willing to help contribute, operate it. And I think that's inherently very hard, right? It takes time, yeah.
Yeah, DAOs are really just a nice network approach to raising capital, and you can start imagining, instead of having some sort of protocol have an ICO, you can have a protocol DAO where communities can make decisions on the future of a specific protocol, which is really interesting and something that we've talked to several protocols about doing for the protocol itself, or sort of adjacent to the protocol. So, instead of a widely used protocol or token giving grants to people to build on their protocol, you could actually have like I call it like DAO adjacent, like structure where the community of token holders or the community that really values this protocol can pull together their capital and start having some sort of incentive to see the future of the protocol grow because they actually have a stake in it. So that's something that we're exploring as well and talking to a few protocols about. We'll have more to share on that in the future, in the near term. So stay tuned.
Great. Santi, did you have anything that you wanted to add about DAOs and maybe DAOs as a reaction to or maturation of some of the energy that went into ICOs? What do you think of that idea? I love some of these ideas that have been coming up around community and trust and reputation.
So I think one of the challenges that we have to confront in the Ethereum community is the fact that there are not that many DAOs out there after 4 or 5 years that the Ethereum blockchain has been going on. I think the last DAO count that I have done is probably 1,100, 1,100 DAOs out there, most of them deployed by the Aragon protocol. Then you'll find probably up to 50 Moloch forks. And then DAO Stack and the different communities that have been researching the space from different angles, and the growth is still not there. If I am my wife runs a company called Open Collective, totally non-blockchain based, but Open Collective does a lot of what DAOs want to do in the traditional financial world. They help organizations and communities raise money from donors in order to, these are organizations that are they don't require to be as big as, in order to become a non-profit organization, but they have a significant community. Then Open Collective has been very popular among open source projects, funding, the development of popular JavaScript libraries, and it just, the back end of that, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of legalities, it's very complex, it can only operate in one jurisdiction, it has a lot of limitations. But during this COVID crisis, I have seen hundreds of collectives being created to help coordinate help for the doctors or buy meals for those working in hospitals. The growth is kind of emerge in a context where it makes sense to coordinate help very fast. And maybe it's because that's plugged to the traditional financial world. and people are still used to using credit cards, and we have all of these onboarding challenges still happening with blockchain world, where it's not easy for the vast majority to download a wallet, to get used with tokens. So a lot of the experimentation in DAOs has been a little bit endogamic. We are the guys that are passionate about this technology. We are passionate about what the smart contracts can do in order to coordinate money and pool funds. We know that the promise is definitely there, but the delivery of that promise is not happening yet. Maybe now, as we enter a new bull phase with the halving, and people price will drive new adoption. That's a given in the blockchain industry. Maybe in 6 months' time, we'll see a renewed sense of interest for the technologies that we're building, and we have to be ready in order to create tools that can help people onboard and easily interact with a DAO. I think I am seeing the demand is definitely there. I see it in projects like Open Collective, but our offer, what we're offering there, it's just not meeting that demand because of the intricacies and the complexity of the usability of engaging with Ethereum blockchain in general and with DAOs specifically. So I think there's still a lot of homework to be done in order to reduce the barrier of entry. And we have to put some emphasis on in that aspect, in the usability, in the user experience, because once you understand the technology, once you understand how DAOs work, it is a far superior technology than the traditional 501c3 or a Delaware corporation, or you name it. It's something that it can really help reduce coordination costs, really help. The reason we create firms is to reduce transactional costs, to make allocation of assets much more effective. It has a real economic driver, and DAOs, from the technical standpoint, they definitely guarantee that on a global way. But we need to keep polishing the tools that will help people interact on a daily basis with these entities.
I would just like to add to that. I mean, I totally agree. I think a lot of folks outside of DAOs also speak to the UX and making sure that it's like a pleasurable experience for the user. I will say with the LAO, we've spent a lot of time to make sure that it's easy and seamless as far as like the user experience. And we've really turned a corner now since we figured out all of the legalese around it. So, I think that we're much further along in building this like permission Silicon Valley than one would think. I'm a little bit more optimistic as far as declaring that like that vision is actually being realized already in the DAO ecosystem. To kind of tack onto that.
To follow on what Pri said, like we've tried to figure out the legal background. We've made joining and creating DAOs really easy on our platform. Once you're onboarded onto Ethereum, the challenge is still just like onboarding onto crypto, as Santi was saying. So, I do imagine in 10 years, if Ethereum onboarding becomes really easy, we won't have Facebook groups and Venmo anymore. We'll just have community DAO. And that's when we'll have kind of fully realized this vision in my mind. And that's certainly what we're working towards with Peeps.
Great. Well, we are approaching the end of our time, and I'm so glad. Some of these topics have come up. Maybe we can just do one final, super quick lightning round, where you say how you can get involved with your project, and any quick wrap-up words that you want to get out to our audience.
So maybe I'll just start. So if you want to get in touch with the LAO, you can go to lao.io. We have a pretty awesome Telegram community, weekly community calls. And if you're interested in applying for funding, you can do so there. Or if you're interested in joining the LAO, you can also do so there. So it's the lao.io. I guess just a parting note, I think we're here as far as bringing DAOs to the mainstream and making it pretty easy and nice to use. So I think this has the potential, as I mentioned before, to really build out this Silicon Valley that we want, rather than folks just having to go to Sand Hill, founders, entrepreneurs having to spend tremendous amounts of time and in meetings rather than building. And I think that this is a path forward for them.
Thank you. Great.
At Democracy Earth, we're right now focused on building a GitHub for DAOs. Let's call it that way. It's a tool that will help anyone to browse and interact with and see the activity of DAOs happening on the blockchain. You can see a demo of that on moloch.democracy.earth, but we're now making that into something that can help anyone browse and search any DAO and eventually interact with them. This is an open source project. We'll be making some announcements about it very soon. And there's a hackathon happening, being organized by Radical Exchange and Gitcoin. It's happening on late May. So check that out. Radical Exchange, it's an organization built behind the ideas of Glenn Weil, the author of Radical Markets. And we're going to do a virtual hackathon for 2 weeks on Gitcoin. And at Democracy Earth, we'll be posting some interesting tasks to work on. Is voting to Moloch type DAOs, for example. So excited about stuff like that.
That sounds awesome.
Hi,
or Peter?
So if you're interested in building a DAO, MetaCartel, we have a lot of folks who are currently operating DAOs, right, and coordinating them. We call them summoners. If you're aspiring summoner, hit us up. We have a forum. We want to help more people launch DAOs and experiment with them.
Awesome. Thank you. And Bill?
Peeps. Yep. So our website is peepsdao.com. If you've got MetaMask, you can go create your own DAO on there in just a couple minutes, and then join Peter's DAO Summoner group so that you can figure out how to build the community. You can also check us out on Twitter at WeThePeeps_US. DM us if you are interested in creating a Peeps DAO or migrating your grassroots movement to a Peeps DAO. We're always happy to help. Thanks, Amanda.
Of course. Thanks so much, guys. If you are interested in MarketingDAO, particularly if you are a marketing, design, or communications professional in the space and want to join with other folks with similar skill sets or interests and get involved, go to marketingdao.org to learn more. And you can also join the supporters Telegram group from there and get some instructions on how to become a member and start doing projects. Thank you so much, everyone. This was wonderful. We got off to a bit of a late start and had some change-ups, but delighted to have you, Priyanka. Thanks so much, everybody. And feel free to tweet at me at Amanda Cassatt. Happy to take the conversation online.